I wanted to show you how I would do it. So the first thing I did was I have open on my screen, I have the document begin unknown, and there's a table here, and I just highlight this whole table, and I hit Control C for copy, and then I go to Excel and I open a new blank workbook, and then I hit Control V for paste. And then I just, drag these around so that they show the whole word. Also, in this document, if you scroll to the end, there's a table here that has some of the answers filled in already, because this is what you're supposed to be using for the physiologic test results experiment. But if you look right here, it's got some of the gram stains and morphologies right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go kind of back and forth between this sheet and the other sheet, and I'm going to fill in the gram reaction and morphology on this table. And I will come back after I've done that. So the next thing I would do after I went through that chart that was right there in the document is I would open up my Benson manual to the exercise that has the title Use of Berge's Manual. The reason for doing this is that there are tables and charts in here already that you would not need to cite if you put them in your lab report. So always go for the easiest way to find the info first, right? So in your book, if you have the one with the blue cover, this is going to be exercise 39, not 42. It should be included in your copy somewhere. It's going to be towards the back of your copy because it's one of the later exercises. But in here is information that was copied from the Berge manual, which is something that is used often in microbiology to help organize and classify organisms. And as you see here, right here is a chart that gives you some idea of which ones might be acid fast, spore forming, catalase, etc. If you use this information on these charts, I know it will be accurate. If you scroll through here further, there's some tables, common gram-positive and gram-negative bacterial species. These are some of the results that you might need to fill in. Notice that it does have the shape, which in our table is called morphology, but shape and morphology are the same thing. Gram reaction right there. So if there was any on your table that you weren't able to fill in, which probably there wouldn't be all of them on the previous document, there's some more you could gather here. You can also go back to your previous unknown flow chart because you already did some of this research to fill in your previous unknown flow chart. So I'm going to go and research all of the gram-positive, gram-negative, and morphologies for everything that was in the chart, and I'll be back after I'm finished with that. So now that I have this whole chart filled in with the gram reaction and morphology of everything, I'm going to do what is called a filter on my data. So you highlight everything in your table and you go to the Data tab. Then you go to this thing that looks like a funnel, Filter. And what that does is it gives you these little drop-down menus, and you can choose to show only your data that has certain results. So if you want to see all of the gram-positive cocci, you would uncheck the minus, uncheck a blank, so that you just have a check mark next to the plus. Click OK. And then you would uncheck rod because you wanted to see the gram-positive cocci. So now that you have this, the next thing you want to do is you want to go over to your flowchart and figure out from the gram-positive cocci, what are the next things I need to know about these organisms in order to classify them? So for gram-positive cocci, I'll need to know about catalase, blood auger, bacitracin resistance, and MSA growth. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in my chart, and then I can look them up, fill them out, and continue. So I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so now that I have these things added to the top row of my chart, I unfiltered everything. I just clicked in one of these boxes and I clicked the filter button again and it took the filtering away. But now we're going to need to filter a new section of data. So you just select the whole thing and you click filter one more time. Now these columns are included in the chart that's allowing you to filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to black out the cells that I don't need to look things up for to make it easier later. So since we determined that these are the things you need to know about for a gram-positive cocci, what you could do is select for gram-negative only and block these out with just by adding like a black fill so that you know you don't have to fill them in later. Oh, I'm sorry, that's black text. I want to do black fill. Wow, that was bad. Then I want to go to select all. And now you see that all the gram-negative rods, those things are blacked out. So now we want to go back to gram-positive rods because those won't need to have that filled in either. So we'll go here and we will black those out as well. And we also want to try gram-negative cocci, and we want to black those out too. So now if we go back to select all and select all, you'll see anything you don't need to fill in, now you've blacked out. So we'll go back to our gram-positive cocci. And then the next thing you'll look at is you go back to your chart, and anything that is catalase negative, we'll need to know about the blood auger. If it's catalase positive, we don't need to know about the blood auger. So let's go in here and we'll figure out if these are all catalase positive or negative, and I'll be back. So as you can see, I filled out all of these using that chart that was in the original document, and then also going back to my flow chart from the first unknown. Now, Micrococcus roseus and Streptococcus pyogenes were not included. So what I did was I went to that BLM exercise 39 in our blue copy of the book, or 42 if you have the same version of the book that is my ebook. And I went to the page that includes this chart right here. And it says here that the genus Streptococcus is catalase negative. And then it says here that the genus Micrococcus is catalase positive. So I can go back to my chart, and Micrococcus is catalase positive, and Pyogenes is going to be catalase negative. Now, if you see me typing the little apostrophe before the positives and negatives, that's just because I want to force Excel to not think that this is a formula. If you don't put that in there, sometimes it'll start to try to do math with your pluses and minuses, and it can mess you up. So now that this is all filled in, I go back to my chart and I say, okay, anything that's catalase positive, I don't need to know about the blood agar. So I sort catalase positive only, and I will block out blood agar. And then I go back, and anything that is catalase negative, I don't need to know about bacitracin or MSA. So change this to negative. Bacitracin and MSA, I will block those out. And then if the bacitracin is susceptible, I don't need to know about MSA. If the bacitracin is resistant, then I do need to know about MSA. So the next thing I want to look up is, of my catalase positive organisms, which ones are susceptible or resistant to bacitracin. So I'll go back to my chart and I will go here. And now I only have 4 things to look up the bacitracin resistance. Now, you could start by going back to your Kirby-Bauer exercise that you did and looking at your homework there. It's possible that some of these results could be in that. If not, you may need to go to outside internet sources. And what I'm going to do, just to make my life easier for later, is I'm going to add a page of places where I can just paste links for myself later when I go back to make my bibliography at the end of the report. So since I'm at the point where I would want to do this, I'm going to unfilter all of this data. And I'm just going to highlight these first 2 columns here. And I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to paste them in. And instead of Gram reaction, I'm going to put link. And I'll just delete these positives and negatives. And or you could go, link and notes. So I would paste the link here. I would type my notes here. That way you can keep track of which pieces of info you find on which source. For example, maybe if you're looking up Aeromonas sobria and you find the Gram reaction on one website and you find about its antibiotic resistance on another site, you could just keep adding columns over here with more notes and more links. And then later when you go back to do your bibliography, it'll be very easy to find where you looked up each item. So I'm going to go and look up the bacitracin resistances, and I will be back. So now that I've gone and looked at our Kirby-Bauer homework from the lab a week or so ago, the Staph aureus result for bacitracin that we got at the time was susceptible. So I was able to fill that in for bacitracin with the S. And then because I have the S there, if you look back at our chart, if it's bacitracin susceptible, then you don't need to know about the MSA. So you could stop right there and black out the MSA. The next thing to do will be to go and look up the rest of these catalase positive, gram positive cocci, find out about their bacitracin resistances. If you find any more that are S, you can block that out, the MSA. And as you go, remember to fill in your bibliography. Since we have this one filled in all the way through to a spot where we could put it into our flow chart, we could stop right here, take a pause, and put Staph aureus in this box on our flow chart under gram-positive, cocci, catalase positive, bacitracin and susceptible. Staph aureus would go right here. Now that I have helped you find one answer on this flow chart, I hope that that helps you to figure out how to complete the rest of it. Um, I hope it gives you some strategies for how to organize yourself. I hope it gives you some strategies for the types of logic that you need as you move through a flow chart. If anyone has further questions, of course, you can contact me anytime. If you need to see another example, it might be best for us to meet over Zoom so that I can screen share with you and show how I'm doing all this research and how you should too. And then we could go through another example on an individual basis. Um, so let me know if you have any further questions. I just wanted to come back briefly and show you how much of this material you could avoid looking up using the logic that's in the flowchart, and how much of it is already presented either in prior homework assignments that you've read in the Benson book or in the supplemental lab manual or in the current assignment in the supplement manual. Everything that's in blue, I was able to fill in just from the various materials out of the SLM and BLM that I had pointed to earlier. Everything in black, you don't have to look up because the logic of the flowchart dictates you don't need to. So when you look at it, it's not as overwhelming of a research project as it probably could be, as long as you heavily utilize the BLM and SLM books.